Hey everybody, it's Jimmy from the DIY and Digital, and today we're designing a building in Tinkercad. Welcome back everybody. First of all, if you haven't already, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, and hit that bell icon so that you don't miss any updates like this video. So you guys know that I do a lot of 3D printing, and a lot of times I go and find models, but recently I've been trying to make my own models. Now I have used several different types of software, most prevalently one called Blender, but Blender is a fairly advanced piece of software and has a very steep learning curve. So I wanted to figure out a simple way to create models that I could 3D print for my model railroad, and that's when I stumbled across Tinkercad. For those of you that haven't heard of Tinkercad, it's basically a free website to use where you can design all sorts of different things using shapes, using circuits. You can do a lot of different things with it. But for our purposes, we're going to be designing a little single-story house that I can 3D print out. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay everybody, this is Tinkercad. It's a totally free website to use and you can design whatever you would like. I like using this because it's really easy and intuitive to use. So we're going to go ahead and get started with designing this house. And we're going to start off with a simple cube. Now I'm just going to begin by scaling it out roughly to a size that I like. I'm not necessarily building it to scale right now, but we're just kind of putting the pieces in place just to get it looking correct first of all. So this is the base of the house, and we're going to raise it up to where I think it should be for a single-story home right here, which is what we're going to be designing. So I do a few little adjustments here, and then I just take a look at it, and that's a good size that I like. So one cool thing is it does have parts like this that are specifically labeled roof, and I'm going to bring this in place right here. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees so that it is sitting correctly. And now I go through the aligning process of getting this down to just the right size that I want. So here I can talk about the different little icons that you see. So the black dots that you see are really for grabbing edges or raising or lowering. And the white dots that are on the corner will move multiple planes or multiple lines on each side. And the white dot up on top of it will change its height, and then the little arrow at the top will also take it and will move it vertically in space. And then you also will see the little arrows that are turns. That's where you would click and adjust the angle if you want to turn something a certain way, and you can turn on all three axes. So I'm going to go ahead and get this to where I want it to be. So now that we have everything where we want it to be, we're going to use this little tool up here called Group. And what this is doing, it's going to link all of these pieces together. So in this case, it's two pieces, but now you can see I've got the beginnings of the shape of a house, and you can always click Ungroup and it'll bring it back if you need to do some additional work. But we're going to go ahead and click Group, and we're going to have the base of our house put together. Alright, so now we're going to do something where we're going to hollow out the house. I'm going to be taking this transparent box that you see right here, it's called a hole, and we're going to size it up here really quick, grabbing those icons. You see I grabbed the black icons and the little black dots, and I'm able to scale things to different sizes. And what we're basically trying to do here is we are going to size this to be just smaller than the footprint of the house itself. And you'll see I take this in and I also do the vertical part, so I'm completely hollowing out, so this is just purely the walls. So now I highlight everything again, and we're going to go ahead and do the grouping tool. Now watch what happens. See how all of a sudden everything's hollowed out? That's what those little transparent hole shapes are. They will hollow out whatever is there when you join them with something. So now we've got the walls of our house. So now we're going to begin making the roof of our house. We're going to start off by grabbing another cube, and we're going to need to make this relatively flat. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change the color right up here. I'm going to make it blue. It really doesn't matter, but just so we can see the different shapes. Then I go ahead and size it out roughly where I need it to be. And I start lining it up and just eyeballing what the final size needs to be. First, I'm going to get the length down. Then I'm going to go ahead and start positioning it, and then I need to figure out what the angle of my roof is going to be. And this is basically a guess and check process when I did it, and I ended up finding out that my roof was pitched at about 31 degrees. So I was able to go ahead and adjust the size of the roof and put it at that angle, and I was able to have one size. And so you can see where I typed in the angle and got everything adjusted properly and was able to get this half of the roof fitted just about perfectly. So there is one half of the roof down. So now what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to copy this and duplicate this section of roof. So we're going to go ahead and click it, make sure it's highlighted, and then we're going to click Control D. You can also do your copy paste, and it duplicates the size. Now we need to rotate it, so we're going to click our rotation tool, and we're going to type in 180 degrees. And then we'll just line everything back up. Now you see I still have the apex of the roof is not quite covered, so we're going to go ahead and solve that. Okay, so we do need to cap off that roof, and the way that we're going to do it is I'm going to go ahead and reach over here, and I'm going to grab another little roof tool, and we're going to go ahead and do the rotation. We're going to rotate it by 90 degrees. And then we're just going to size it down. Remember, this does not have to be the exact same. You actually maybe want this to stand out a little bit because typically you can see the cap of the roof as being slightly different. So I'm just going to grab this and move it in space, and we're going to go ahead and lower it and get it into position. And then we're basically just going to play around with it until we get something that we like. All right, now that we have our roof together, we're going to go ahead and highlight all the pieces, and we're going to select group, and we put that all together as one roof piece. As you can see, we have one roof we can lift off, and that's going to be how we're going to eventually attach it in the real world. So there we have our roof and we have our walls. So the next thing that we need to get onto is windows. Okay, so I move the roof off to the side and I grab another cube, and this is going to eventually be our window frame. So we're just really going to eyeball this because not all windows are created the same. And remember, with modeling, you're just going for a look and feel unless you're really doing prototypes, but even then when you're doing prototypes, you may not get everything exactly right. So we're going to go ahead and size this down, and we're going to go ahead and see where it fits. We're going to use our arrow tools and our grab tools, and that looks like a good spot for it. So now we need to go ahead and bring that shape back out because we need to hollow it out. So we're going to go grab another one of the whole cubes, and we're going to go ahead and size it down. And remember, we're just going to eyeball this. There's no specific measurements unless you're trying to do some sort of prototype. So go ahead and get this size the way that we want. And you got to remember, this is also when we put this in, we're going to put this whole section in, and then we're going to group them so that they make the hole in the wall so that we have a see-through window. So there is our first window. We're going to make sure that it goes all the way through. And now we need to highlight everything, and we're going to go ahead and duplicate it and make a bunch of windows so that we can have uniform windows all around the house. The next thing that we need to do is we need to go ahead and position our windows. Now the reason that we went in and set our window frames in where we like them was because we needed to make sure that we had the right height for the look we were trying to achieve. So right now I'm going to go around and we're just going to be moving it in X and Y space and putting all of our windows in. So I'm going to take 3 of these windows, or 2 of these windows rather, and I'm going to put them on the back wall over here. And remember, you're just going for your preference. No right or wrong, especially if you're just scratch building this house from nothing. This is just the way that you want something to look. So now we have all of our windows in place, we have all the holes in place, so that when we join everything together, we're going to end up with the see-through portion. So let's go ahead and highlight everything. And then we're going to click Group. And voila, we've got a house with windows. So I'm very happy with this very simple way for making these windows in the house. You can see they have a nice little frame around them. They have good spacing on the inside so that nothing is really hanging off on the inside. So the next thing we're going to do is we need to put some of the interior window frame, the little cross and everything. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to ungroup everything. And then I'm going to go ahead and grab another cube. And then basically I need to resize this so that we have enough space for glue to be able to stick on the interior. Because the way I'm designing this is, rather than trying to print it, that's a really small area to print and you have a lot of potential for messing up an entire print based off this, I'm just going to size these out roughly, and then it's going to be something that I can stick on the interior to simulate the window. So now that that is done, I'm going to go ahead and pull the hole and the interior window frame section out, and I'm going to group them. So now I have a nice little glue plate where I can stick behind that window. And in order to hollow the window back out, I'm just going to duplicate another hole and go ahead and put it back there. So now I've got a good interior window frame that I'm going to be able to easily glue on the inside for some detail. Now the next thing that I need to do is I'm going to go ahead and grab another cube and I'm going to just shrink it on down. And we just need to put that center bar that's in every window pretty much. So we're going to go ahead and size that down and we're going to put it in place. And we want this to be fairly small. And you can see why we didn't want this to be part of the larger print, because it'd be something that'd be very easy to break. So we're going to go ahead and put that in there. And we're going to select everything and go ahead and group those together. And we need 7 of those. Next detail I want to put in is a door, and again this is something I'm going to eyeball the rough size of, but we're going to go ahead and grab a cube and we're going to size it down to the rough area I want of the door frame, and we're going to have the door just be pre-molded as part of the entire structure. So I'm just going to keep on tweaking, figuring out exactly where I want the door, make it a little bit taller. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to grab a hole, and we're going to use this just to carve out a little bit of the door itself so that you have that little inset from the door frame. So I'm going to go ahead and size that accordingly. And once we have it in position, we can go ahead and join everything. And there we go, we have the door in place. If you wanted to have a separate door that you put on, you could also just do this like a window where you make the cut through with the hole. So one thing that I decided that I wanted this house to have after the fact was a foundation around it. So I raised it up a little bit and I grabbed another cube. And this I'm just going to size up and put around the base of it, and we're going to carve it out just like we did the actual house frame. So I'm going to go ahead and size that up. The first thing I want to do is I want to change the color. I'll make it a nice gray, like an actual like concrete foundation. And we want it to be right there at the door because we are going to put a little step up to go to the door. So we're going to size it up and then we can go ahead and join everything up. So before we can join it to the rest of the house, we're going to go ahead and cut out the excess, and we're going to be using the whole cube just like we've done with everything else. So I'm going to go ahead and size that out accordingly. Make sure it's fairly even. It can be a bit larger than the other side. And then we'll go ahead and make sure that it cuts all the way through. And then we can highlight everything and join it together. And now we have a foundation on the house. And we'll go ahead and join those together. So the next thing we need to do is we're going to put a little step up, little stoop on the front of the house since we put a foundation. I'm going to go ahead and color that in yellow just so we know what we're editing on. And I grabbed a cube and I sized it up accordingly. And I'm going to go ahead and put that on the front right here. Line that up the best that we can. And then we'll go ahead and bring it up to the appropriate height for the door. So there is the beginning of our little step up. I then grabbed a few more cubes so that I could make some steps down. And then I went ahead and highlighted everything right there and click group. And that's pretty much the completion of the foundation of the house and the walls and the windows and the roof. And so the only thing we really have left to do is one little detail, and I want to put a little chimney coming out the top. Okay, so in order to make our chimney, we need to remember the angle of our roof, which is 31 degrees. So we're going to go ahead and grab a few cubes. And we're going to size this down. Now this is going to be the base of our chimney itself. And I'm going to rotate this by 31 degrees. And then I just go ahead and duplicate that cube. So I've already got one of similar size. And I go ahead and get it rotated back to 0. And I begin to stack it on top. And this is a little bit of artist eye, as you can imagine. And what we basically want to do is we want to line this up to where it's pretty close to those corners touching right there. Then since we're eyeballing it, we just want to make sure that everything lines up perfectly. So we're going to keep rotating around it. And now the way I'm rotating around, there's a couple ways to rotate. It's really by left clicking on your mouse and holding, and you can rotate. You can also press the control click. That's really good if you're on a laptop with a touchpad. Those are going to be some of your buttons for moving around. And it's just really playing around with the program until you get used to it. There's not much of a learning curve, but just play around with it, different mouse stuff. Just remember control click will do some stuff. But back to the chimney itself, you can see I've brought a hole, and one thing I like to do with hole cubes like this is I will use them as actual cutters right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this right here and I'm going to merge all three of these, or group them rather, and when I group them we're going to get a nice even side. Now you may have seen me go down to the bottom and adjust some movements, and what I was doing there was adjusting like what the mouse will snap to, whether it's 1 millimeter, half a millimeter, quarter millimeter, tenth of a millimeter. That's down there in the bottom right. So let's go ahead and group these two together. And there we go. We have the beginnings of our chimney. Now we need to put that little topper on there. So we're going to go ahead, and once we have this thing sized out appropriately, we're going to go ahead and grab another cube. And what we're going to do with that cube is we're really just going to kind of smush it flat, and then we're just going to sit it right on top. So the first thing we got to do is we just got to get it down to the rough size. And again, this is just eyeballing. Again, this is not any sort of specific set thing, just what really looks good in your eye, because that's ultimately what matters. So we'll go ahead and scale this down, and we are going to move this and put it in place. And then we'll highlight the whole thing and we'll move it into a place on that, and then we'll go ahead and group it together, and we're going to make it a slightly different color. And there we go. So now we have all the components of our model that we're eventually going to put together. So now we're going to go up to the top right and we're going to click the export, and we're going to select STL. And then that's going to download an STL file to the computer, and we can head over to our 3D printing software. Okay, so I've loaded my file into the 3D printing software, and it's not the right size for the print bed. My printer is a Flashforge Finder for this particular thing. We're actually using two separate printers in this. So, and this is not the proper scale either for in scale. So what I'm really going to do is, first of all, I need to cut off all the parts that I'm not going to print on this particular printer. Then you'll need to scale your house size appropriately. This is a bit more towards HO scale size, and I need to scale this down to N scale. So I went ahead and did the math, figuring out what I needed for the front of this to be, and then I can uniform scale it down. So I ended up figuring out that my model needed to be down about 55% of size, which means actually I made it pretty close to HO scale, which is N scale is 54% smaller than HO scale. So I've go ahead and placed the two parts that I'm going to print on my print surface right here, which is going to be the roof and the walls of the house itself. I'm going to be doing the details in a different print. So I have everything set up. We're going to go ahead and generate the supports, and then we will be good to go. Now I'm actually using two separate printers for this project. The first is a standard filament extrusion printer. It is a Flashforge Finder. It's one I've used before in other videos, and it is a great starter printer for anyone looking to get into 3D printing. It prints on PLA filament. So this is a program called Autodesk Mesh Mixer, and if you have another 3D printer that has software that you don't exactly love, this is a great free alternative to that normal printer. You can do most of the functions of a 3D slicing program, and you can resize and do any sort of editing to the models as well. And right now I am editing down the size of the detail pieces because the 3D printer software for my resin 3D printer, which we're about to start using, isn't the best when it comes to adjusting model shape and size. So I prefer to do it in a different program and then bring it into that slicing software. So this is the software for my Resin 3D printer, which is a Longer Orange 10. Longer is a company that makes affordable 3D printers. They are relatively new, but their printers are really good. And you can see here I have my detail pieces, the window frames, and the little chimney stack. So the main thing that I'm going to need to do here, since these are already good to go, is I'm going to need to generate the supports. Now, supports for a Resin 3D printer are a little different because they're going to be hanging upside down. So you really just need something for it to hold on to the print bed so that it doesn't fall down into the vat and mess up your print. So we're going to go ahead and slice this out, and you can take a look at the slice right here and you can see what each layer that's going to be printed is. Now, the way a Resin 3D printer works is either through a UV laser or a UV LCD projection. You're going to cure UV cured resin in little layers, and it's just going to project and do it that way. So we're going to go ahead and save this out, and we're going to head over to the 3D printer. So this is my Resin 3D printer. It's a Longer Orange 10, and you can see that the print base is a lot smaller than the regular filament 3D printer. So I'm going to go ahead and select my details print, and we're going to go ahead and get this print started up. You can see the very small print base. It's going to lower down into a vat of resin and completely submerge into it, and within that there is a screen that projects through UV LEDs and cures the resin in layers. And this is what your end product is. You can see here I have the details, and it's got a lot of excess resin on it, so we're going to have to drain that off and clean that. Now you'll notice that I'm wearing gloves. That's one thing with this UV cured resin. You will have a very bad day if it touches your skin. So now I have all my parts collected and cleaned up here. You can see I got my walls, my roof, my window frames, and my chimney here attached to this little piece of painter's tape so it can stand upright. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to mix up my house wall paint with some airbrush thinner, and then I'm going to take my airbrush and I'm going to spray the walls and get a nice even coat. You notice I'm sparingly using the paint. Sometimes acrylic paint doesn't adhere the best to PLA and you can get a lot of runniness. So the next thing I'm going to do, you'll notice that I put all the window frames on a piece of painter's tape to hold them in place as well. I only need to paint one side of these, so I'm just going to paint one side of these white, and then when they dry I'll be able to glue them on the inside and we will have three-dimensional windows. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and paint up this chimney stack here really quick with a Georgia clay color of acrylic paint, and it really doesn't take that much paint at all. So now I'm going to begin painting the roof, and I'm going to be doing a bit of a different technique. So what I basically do is I'm going to completely paint the roof just in a normal painting method, but that's not going to leave it exactly the way that I want it. So basically I'm just going to keep moving the paint around, going back and forth, left and right, almost to where I get where I'm dry brushing it. And I'm just going to continue that process over and over again until I get a good even coating. It may not be all the way through, and maybe I'll see some of the white through, but the coating will be even. The next thing I do is I take a three-way black, brown, and gray paint mixture mixed for the airbrush and do a sporadic coating on the roof itself, and this gives me kind of a multicolored look where I've got that brown base behind it, and then I have this so you can see through, so it looks multi-layered, gives it a little bit of the weathering before I actually do any of the weathering process. And now I can begin gluing everything together. I start off by attaching all of the window frames, and all I gotta do is put a little bit of the tester cement that I'm using, and I then just slide the painted sides of the windows in place once they're dry, of course, and then those are pretty simple to put on. And the next thing that I do is I attach the roof, which again is very, very simple, just making sure that I do have the correct side facing forward. And then the next thing we're going to do is this is actually the most difficult part, it takes a little bit of finagling, is putting the chimney stack on the roof. And once you get it on there, it looks really great. And here is the final product. I did a little bit more paint with the foundation and the door. Personally, I'm really happy with the way that it turned out. It's going to go great once I'm able to put it into a scene and do some more detailing and accenting around it so that it fits into the layout. So that's how I design and 3D print a little house using a couple 3D printers and Tinkercad. I hope you guys really enjoyed that. This isn't the last you're going to be seeing of me 3D printing or that little Tinkercad house. So if you haven't already, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, and hit that bell icon so that you don't miss any updates like this video. Until next time, I'm Jimmy from the DIY and Digital. Happy railroading!